The reason we do this work is we believe the single most important skill for anyone to learn and develop over your lifetime, for business or for your life, or for your personal life, is the ability to truly connect with another and truly influence those positively around us. Further, we believe that we're building the future that we're all going to be experiencing and living in tomorrow through how we're relating and connecting with people today. And so what we want to think about tonight is how can we bring some conscious intention to how we can connect and influence these ladies that you've chosen to spend the next year with. Doesn't matter if it's your first time or your 10th time. Doesn't matter if you're with a large organization or a small organization or no organization. You have an opportunity to truly touch a life here. And I hope that you've come into this conversation or come into this opportunity with some idea of how you might like to make use of it. If not, perfectly okay. We're here to start thinking about that a little bit tonight. On the other hand, for those of you who've done it many times, maybe you have a pretty clear idea in your mind. But in any case, you have a wonderful opportunity to touch a life here. Let me ask you, how many people decided to sign up for this opportunity because someone recommended it to you? Great. How many of you gave careful thought to it before you said yes? Okay, good. Because if some of you just simply said yes in order to honor your friendship with the other person, that's very nice and wonderful and kind for you to do that, but in my calculus, maybe that's not the best reason to sign up for something like this. There's many other reasons to sign up besides honoring a friendship that you have with someone else, and many which are more important in my mind, such as your ability to truly change a life forever. And not just one life. The life that you change ends up having a ripple effect with other folks that that person happens to have relationships with, and it's going to spread out to directions and distances that you won't even be able to see. So the stakes are high here. At the same time, the potential cost is high. This particular program could challenge you. It could challenge your patience. It could challenge your integrity. It could challenge your commitment. We just talked a minute ago about how challenging this particular mentee was for this mentor last time around. It might challenge your creativity. How will you be able to respond in those particular situations? How will you respond in those situations when that comes up? So rather than simply mentoring by the seat of your pants, we'd like to have a discussion tonight where we can think a little bit carefully, thoughtfully, prudently about how you can bring yourself to this opportunity and how you can make the most of it for both the other individual and yourself. And if you're new to mentoring and you think that the only reason to be a mentor is because you get to give something, that's wonderful. But there's also, for anyone who's done mentoring before, you recognize how much you get out of it. And so I see it as a two-way opportunity. What is it you can give to another individual, and what is it you can get from the experience? So we're going to have a very kind of open and casual conversation here. This is not a presentation by any stretch. We're going to have an interactive discussion about how you see this particular opportunity, how you've kind of brought yourself into it, and how you intend to show up as a mentor in this relationship. Okay? So to put it kind of in simple terms, two simple objectives for today. We want to bring some thought to this particular opportunity in front of us. And I'm delighted we have a couple mentees in here, and I'm going to certainly encourage you to speak up anytime this evening and give people your perspective because it's unique. And second, I hope we can identify a couple of touchstones for each of you. My intention or my hope for each of you is you'll bring at least one thing out of this conversation tonight that you can use in your relationship. Maybe it's something you need to focus on that you hadn't thought of before. Maybe it's a question that you need to ask the other individual or ask yourself and think about the answer to. Or maybe it's a technique or kind of a way of interacting with the other individual that will have some value for both of you in the relationship. Something that you can hold on to and bring with you into the relationship. And I'll ask you at the end, whatever that is. So let's start by asking the first basic question, the most fundamental one. Why are you here? Why did you say yes to this opportunity? Having worked with a lot of mentoring programs in different organizations, people have all kinds of experiences, good and bad and otherwise, unfortunately. But you know, what you touched on is the opportunity for someone to have a life-changing experience. Virtually anyone you ever talk to who's achieved something in life, if you say, how did you get here? Almost always someone will say, well, a few years ago I had this relationship with so-and-so and I really got something out of it. This person taught me a lot, or this person's example taught me a lot. Almost everyone who's succeeded can point to the value that they've had in some mentoring relationship along the way. So the agenda, we're just talking a little bit about why you're here. We want to talk a little bit about how do we create intended outcomes. How do we create the vision that we have for something, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business partnership, whether it's a mentee-mentor relationship. How do we create outcomes? And secondly, we'll talk a little bit more about some specific ways that we might do that. Hopefully you'll be able to pick up something that you can apply in your situation. Creating intended outcomes. There's really two basic ways that we create, in the most general sense, we create relationships or outcomes in our relationships. The first is how we show up. That is, how we bring ourselves to the relationship. What's our mindset? What's our approach? What's on our mind as we bring ourselves into the relationship and into every interaction that we have with that individual? Every interaction is an opportunity to strengthen a relationship or weaken a relationship, or maybe do really nothing. It's kind of more of a neutral interaction. But if we bring some intention to how we're showing up and what we're bringing into that space, maybe we can create a more positive interaction more of the time. And secondly, what we're doing in our relationship most of the time is communicating. Surveys show that people in management, average wherever you are in management, spend approximately up to 75% of their time in communication. And when you think about what it means to be in relationship, what it generally means is to be in communication. Whether it's speaking, texting, letter writing, whatever it might be, how we relate to another, how we experience another is through communicating with that individual. So we want to take two aspects of communicating, listening and asserting, which is another word for speaking, and think about how we do those things typically in our relationships with others. What do we mean by showing up? Showing up is an expression meaning everything that we carry into a relationship or a specific interaction in that relationship. The history that we have with that individual, if there is any, our values, our intentions or goals. We bring judgments, we bring expectations, we bring assumptions, we bring all kinds of things with us into that particular relationship and into that interaction. The question is, are these going to serve us well or not? Are they going to work for us or against us? If you're really angry with the person that you had the last interaction with and you come back to that person, it's quite possible that you'll bring some of that residue with you into the current conversation. And that might not be ideal for you or the other individual at that moment in time. What we want to do is take a few minutes to think about what you might be bringing into your relationships with your mentors. Could you pass those out now, please? What I'm going to do is I'm going to have Nicole pass out a piece of paper. On this piece of paper are 75 different values. What I'd like you to do is, you can ignore the first page with the text on it. I'd like you to look at this page with all the values on it and simply select what you believe are the top 3 values for you personally. Not what your mother or father says you should have as a value, not what you might put on a resume to look impressive to someone else, but really the 3 concepts, or 2, that you believe are most important in human relations from your point of view. I'll give you 5 minutes or so to do that. Just look through the list, see what comes up for you, pick 2 or 3. You know the old saying, know thyself? If you believe it's important for you to know yourself, to succeed in life and to have a happy life and those kinds of things, if I were to ask you, do you know yourself? Or how well do you know yourself? What would your answer be? Very, very well. Okay? Yes?
Not as well as I thought I did.
Not as well as I thought I did. Why do you say that?
Because it's a little hard to decide.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is why we do a values clarification. Because one way to look at yourself is to think, what do I think is important? If we ask the question, what is a value? What are values? Most people say something like, what's important? Or something to live by, a principle. I go further than that. I say not only is it a principle to live by, your values truly are who you are. In other words, you are your values. If I were to describe Nicole, I'd say she's a person who is caring. She is creative. She's giving. She's thoughtful. And many more things. She's a walking, talking example of those values. That's how I know her. I know her as those things in human form. And if I ask you, do you know yourself? And you say, very, very well. And I say, great, what are your top 3 values? I don't know. Then do you really know yourself? If you look at this and you say, this is the first time I ever thought about this. Great. That means maybe you're sharpening the focus on yourself to understand yourself a little better. Good, bad, or otherwise, you're bringing all of these things into every interaction you have, some combination of these things, into every action you have with everyone else. Are you doing it with intention, or is it simply unconscious? Are you living and interacting by the seat of your pants? Or are you bringing some kind of intention into your interactions? And if you're bringing intention in, what's the intention based on? Here's my definition of intention. 3 words. Intention is your will, focused. But the question is, focused on what? Well, a big answer to that is what you happen to choose. If you chose what's really true for you. And that's why I said this is not something that your mom or dad says you ought to value. It's what you truly value. When I do these kinds of things with groups, I always say, if there's anyone here who's married or in a long-term relationship with someone else, I'll donate $100 to your favorite charity if both of you happen to select the exact same 3 in the exact same order. And it's never happened. I haven't paid yet. But this is the point. This is the point. We are unique individuals, and we're going to bring some version of these 3 things into our relationship. But let me ask you a more pointed question. How will you bring integrity into your relationship? How will you bring faith into your relationship? How will you bring honesty into your relationship? Have you thought about that? Maybe you haven't because you just identified those values 2 minutes ago. But on what are you going to base your relationship? On what are you going to focus your will? Maybe it is honesty, integrity, and faith, or whatever it is you say. So I have an idea. I've always wanted to do this. I've never seen it done. What if our business cards didn't have our job title on it, but it had our top 3 values? Because, you know, you can't tell much about a person when they say, I'm double second assistant manager of whatever. That says something about the individual. But if they say, my life is based on honesty, integrity, and faith, okay, that gives me a different lens through which I can think about that individual. And these are, of course, the challenges that we see when we work as teams. People are bringing different values into the team setting. Some people, it's like competition and getting ahead. Other people, it's more like collaboration and teamwork, for example. Right? So many different ways we can come into a relationship. So let me ask you again. I'd like to hear one value that you selected and one way that you could, not that you have to commit to it tonight, one way that you could display or honor that value in your upcoming interactions with your mentee. So the whole learning point here is understand where you are on these issues and have a conversation in some form with your mentee. And it doesn't have to all be the very first time you meet them. Maybe you choose to do it that way, but you don't have to. But we grow closer in relationship by going from the unknown to the known. And generally the way we go from unknown to known is to ask a question or to listen carefully. So that's where we're going to go next. Let's talk a little bit about the role of listening. I mean, a couple of these stories really highlight the value of listening carefully. Let's talk about that a little bit. First question before we do this. Why should someone listen? Why is it important to listen in a relationship? Yes? To get a response. Okay, good. To hear the response. You learned something.
You need to listen to learn other person's point of view, but also, if you're not listening, you might be taking the absolute incorrect action.
If you're not listening, you might be taking the absolute incorrect action. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes?
Have a relationship. If you're not listening, you're not really in a relationship.
I'm sorry?
To have a relationship, if you're not listening, you're not really in a relationship. You're just really doing a monologue.
Right. How about that? If you're not listening, you're just in a monologue. Or what's worse than that, you're giving the person an experience of not being listened to by you.
Disrespectful.
How do you think that feels? Thank you. What else? What are some other reasons that we should actually focus on listening in a relationship, not just the mentoring one, but any relationship?
Probably clarify.
Clarify.
Because maybe you have a certain point of view or thought, and you need to clarify.
Right.
It's the right thing that you're thinking.
Find out that you were thinking something wrong, and now you have the chance to get it right. Thank you. Yes?
To understand where the other person is coming from, what they're feeling, what they're thinking. 'Cause
Understanding,
if you're not
sure.
listening, or if you're formatting your response when they're talking, you're not listening.
Yeah, right. If you're talking, how can you be listening? Or as my grandfather says, you never learn anything when your mouth is open. Thank you. Yes?
Mutual respect.
Mutual respect. Got it. So if respect is on your list of values, maybe listening ought to be a part of that. Yes?
To know what to expect.
To what?
know what to expect.
To know what to expect, sure. You might not know what to expect, or you may have a mis-expectation. What else? Yes?
Something also builds trust.
Builds trust. How does it build trust?
The signal you get if someone is listening to you that they're actually caring about your point of view,
Mm.
and when they do respond back, it's with all of the information that you can provide, right? That creates that trusted relationship.
Thank you. How many people would like to give your person an experience of being trusted or being in a trusting relationship? Okay, one way to get there is through listening. How about self-esteem? How many of you anticipate that your person may have less than a full supply of self-esteem? What does listening, truly listening, do for an individual like that?
Makes them feel important. Makes them
Feel important. They are important. What? Knowledge. And what is it like when someone has something to say to you and you're not there, you're not listening? What experience do they have of that? You don't care about them. And for a person who's struggling with his or her own self-esteem, to start with, what might that experience be like for her? Especially painful. Might cause the person to close up, withdraw, back out of the relationship in some way. What do we call listening or active listening? Perhaps you've heard the term. Here's one definition. There's many out there. An intentional combination of mindset and behavior set that combine to create extraordinary understanding and personal connection. We talk with a lot of people, but are we really communicating? Or we talk with a lot of people, but are we truly in an intimate relationship with everyone? Do you want to be in an intimate relationship with your mentee? It's a question for you to consider. If so, think about the role that listening could play in building that. Here's a mindset, simple mindset to think about. 2 questions to ask yourself first. In a relationship, sometimes one person has a particular need for something, and sometimes the other person has a need for something. So someone might come to the other person in the office and say, hey, would you mind please running off 3 copies of this before the meeting because I need to run to the bathroom? The person says, okay, sure, no problem. Or someone comes to you and they say, you know what, I really didn't understand what that guy was talking about last night, that guy David. I mean, it just totally didn't hit me right. What was he talking about? And you can share whatever your perspective on that was. The person is coming to the other person. In other words, the interaction has been stimulated by the fact that that person needs something or wants something at that particular moment in time. And of course, this is why we always ask questions, because we need an answer, or we want some guidance, or we want some perspective, or we want an opinion, something like that. So the first question to ask yourself is, at this moment in time, who has the need in our relationship? And if it's the other person, that means I need to be listening right now. If I have a need, it means I need to say something. I need to assert. But if the other person has a need at a particular moment in time, I need to be listening. I need to be in my active listening skills. It might be for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, an hour, depending on who you're talking with, what you're talking about. So ask yourself, at any given moment, I'm interacting with this person. We've come together. Who has the need? Other person? Okay, I need to listen. Then the question is, what's the nature of the need? What is this person looking for? When a person comes to you for some reason, what could they be looking for in a general sense? Pardon?
Your attention.
Attention, could be.
Assistance.
Assistance, what else?
Opinion?
Opinions, could be.
Thoughts?
Thoughts. Support. What else?
Encouragement?
Encouragement, sure. Companionship, could be anything. The question for you to think about is, what are they coming to me for? The person may ask you, can I wear flip-flops to the law office? But the real question may be something else. It's, oh my gosh, I'm a little nervous that I don't have anything other than flip-flops. And I don't have enough money to buy flip-flops. And what I'm really concerned about is, am I going to get into trouble here, or am I, worse, going to embarrass my mentor by wearing something that I'm afraid might be inappropriate? Could be that the question is quite different from what the person actually says. This is where you need to be listening. What is the nature of the need? Is it simply a question, can I wear flip-flops? Or is it, oh my gosh, I've got a problem, all I have is flip-flops? Big difference there. So 3 things you can keep in mind, and just see if you do these things all the time, or maybe you do some of them sometimes and not the others. But if you don't do one of these things, chances are the other person is going to have an experience of not being heard by you. First one is exactly what Nicole said earlier. Meet them where they are. Part of respect and part of listening means at this particular moment, I'm giving myself to you in our relationship. And another time, you'll give yourself to me when I have a particular need for something. But in a relationship, it is often going back and forth. At one moment, one person has a need for support or guidance or whatever it is. Sometimes the other person does. First, meet them where they are. Understand what's true for them. The biggest challenge we have in connecting with other human beings is our ability to understand their subjective experience of life. Because we're stuck in our own subjective experience of life. It's hard for us to really understand what it looks like from their point of view. And especially as a mentor or mentee, a person may be coming from a different background from you, or a person who's had different experiences from you. It's very easy to have a very big gap there, that you may not even recognize the distance in that gap. That's part of the challenge or part of the opportunity. Second, stay with them as long as they need you to be there. If they need you to talk with them for 15 minutes, but you only give them 5, what kind of an experience are you giving them? An experience of not being heard, not being respected, not being served, not being something. But what do you do if they want 15 minutes and you only have 5? Or they need 2 hours, you only have 1. What do you do?
Just manage the expectation from the start.
Okay.
I already have 5 minutes to give you right now. We're going to make up that other time later in the week, unless, of course, it's an emergency and you need me to speak to you right now. I mean,
Okay, could be.
manage them.
Could absolutely be something like that. I only have 5 minutes to give you right now, but this sounds really important, and I'll be glad to talk with you at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Would that work for you? Last one. Get it all and get it right. If you get all the facts, then you can create a more ideal response. And if you get them all right, you can probably create a better response, or at least the best one possible. If you don't get it all and you're only dealing with half the facts, or you've got wrong facts or a misunderstanding of the situation, chances are you're going to give a response that's perhaps not ideal for that individual. So what we want to focus on right now are a couple of specific behaviors that you can share as a listener so that you can get it all and get it right. The intention here is to hear what the world looks like from that person's point of view and understand it all and understand it as accurately as possible. Get it all first. 3 particular skills here. Patient listening, tell me more, ask open-ended questions. Now I'm going to ask you when we're done talking about these for just a minute, which is one that kind of gets you into trouble, or which is the one that maybe you don't apply as much as you might otherwise. Get it all. Patient listening. Patient listening means simply keeping your mouth shut and allowing the other person to say what she wants to say in her own words, rather than leading her and guiding her towards something that may be your perception of it that doesn't allow her to say it in her own way. Second, tell me more. When you give someone a tell me more response, let's say they've talked a little bit and they've given you some information, you say, tell me more about this part about it, or tell me more about that part about it, or just please continue. What you're doing is an explicit invitation for them to keep talking. That's evidence to them that you care about what they're doing at this particular moment more than anything else in the world, and you want that to continue. That's a very powerful validation for anyone. People sometimes need to be heard, whether it's a little thing or a big thing. And if you say to them, please tell me more, you're saying, I care to listen to you more now than anything else that I'm doing or could do. Ask open-ended questions. What's an open-ended question? It's a question that begins with what, where, when, why, how. It's a question that cannot be answered yes or no. Did you have a good day today? No. It's the end of the conversation. How was your day today? Well, it started off fine until 11 o'clock when Nicole walked into the room, and then all hell broke loose, and then blah, 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 blah. Person might talk for another 30 minutes. That's getting it all. Sometimes a closed-ended question, a yes and no question, prevents you from getting it all. So let me ask you, what's one of these 3 that you don't employ that much that perhaps you could get more mileage out of? Patient listening for you? Okay, that's what it is for me too. You too? How many people are patient listening? It's kind of your like,
We need
you need more patient listening, right. How many people don't use tell me more or an invitation to continue very often? You don't use that one, okay? And 2 folks. Okay, and last one, open-ended questions. How many people, I'm sure you do it for a living, right? I'm sure that's common for anyone who's a therapist or a social worker. They're always trained in these kinds of open-ended questions, absolutely. And you as well, I saw your hand up too. Yep, got it. Okay, get it right. This is where you can help yourself make sure that you understand correctly or accurately. Paraphrase. This is a very powerful technique. Simply feeding back what you heard from the other person in your own words, including both the facts and the feelings. So if someone tells you, I had an awful day today. I went into the office and it started off fine, but then the meeting got started late and the boss chewed out my presentation and said it was unorganized and said it wasn't very clear, and then my lunch was canceled, blah, blah, blah. I've just about given up. I just don't want to work there anymore. How could you paraphrase that in your own words? Right, that's the patient listening, right. So you've heard all that. You could say something like, all right, let me make sure I got this right. Started off fine, then you got chewed out by your boss. I can understand how that might be a little bit frustrating. Then you had the problem with lunch, and now you're thinking that you just don't really want to work there anymore. Did I hear that right? The great thing about this is, chances are if you were listening, you got 90% of it right, 95%. And they get the experience of proof, evidence, that you really were listening. Second one is clarify. What do you mean by? We use a lot of expressions. Such and such was a no-brainer. Or, you know how Susan is. Well, I'm not sure I know what you mean. What are you talking about, Susan? What part of Susan, for example? We let these things go by all the time. Let me ask you, how many of you frequently paraphrase what you hear from others? How many of you sometimes paraphrase what you hear from others? How many of you never paraphrase what you hear from others? Okay. How about clarify? How many of you often clarify when you hear something you don't understand? How many of you sometimes clarify? How many of you never clarify? Just let those expressions go right over your head. That's a way that you might not get it right. All right, so these are 5 simple things that you can do. You can consider picking one of them that is something that you don't normally do that maybe you could create a more powerful impact on the person that you're listening to. Any questions about any of these? Okay, now we've got about 15 minutes left. We'll do it quickly. I'm going to get to your part now, which is the speaking part, right? So what I heard from her a minute ago was she was listening and feeding back what she heard, and then she offered her opinion. Your perspective is not quite right because, right? That's what we call assertion or speaking. And in any interaction, sometimes there's a role for that. But as we said before, sometimes people are coming to you for one particular reason. They want companionship, or they want validation, or they want information, or they want a judgment, or they want something else. But if you give them a judgment when what they want is information, they're going to experience that as you're not having heard them. You with me? Mm-hmm. If a person comes to you for companionship and you give them an opinion, they're going to hear that as a disconnect. They're going to experience that as a disconnect. And so we have to be thoughtful about what is the nature of the need for the other individual. And is it appropriate for us to respond in an assertive way, in some assertive way? Yes?
I was going to say, sometimes you just have to ask.
Yes. How do you find out what's the nature of the need? Right.
Sometimes people just want to vent. They don't want anything.
Yes. How can I help you?
Right.
Well, I just got to get it off my chest. Just listen to me. Okay, I can do that. No problem. Give it to me. That's very different from saying, give it to me and I'll tell you what I think about it. Totally different interaction. And these are the things we typically overlook when we're listening or not listening. All right, so let's go to the assertion side. Assertion, behavior that allows a person to act in his or her interest without violating the rights of others to act similarly. So if you have a mentee who's continually not showing up on time, or if you have a mentee who has been, you've explained the flip-flop rule, and the 3rd day in a row she's got the flip-flops on. You need to talk about something. You need to have a conversation here. Many different ways to do it, but we'll just talk about a couple general ones that have some kind of science behind them. Why should we assert? Honor your own needs. A relationship means that 2 of you have needs and 2 of you have the opportunity to serve the other. That's what being in a relationship means, serving another's needs. You can increase your understanding or increase the understanding that the other person has of your particular perspective or view in the world. If listening is your opportunity to understand someone else's view of the world, assertion is your opportunity to help someone else understand your view of the world. With me? If both sides get it all and get it right, you can have a wonderful relationship. If not, you probably won't. Gain acceptance, decrease potential conflict, contribute to the other's understanding of the world. This is where your comment comes in. Absolutely could be that. This is what I heard from you, and can I offer a little feedback? A little bit different from saying, this is what I heard from you, and here's what I think about it. So you could respond just as you did, or you could respond by saying, let me feedback what I heard. This is what I heard, and would you be comfortable if I gave you a few of my own thoughts on it? And they might say yes, they might say no. Same question again, who has the need here? At this moment, I have a need because my mentee has shown up late 3 times in a row. I have a need for that person to understand the importance of being on time, for whatever your reasoning is. If that's the case, then you have some intentions. Authentically share what's true for you. Be open and honest. You build trust through honesty and through knowledge. Expect a willingness to understand, although you won't always get that in every relationship, but of course you can expect it. And you don't have to necessarily require agreement. What you're looking for is the willingness to the other person to listen and understand what you're talking about. You can't necessarily expect them to jump into your boat, just like they shouldn't expect you to necessarily jump into their boat. So a couple of things. One is, that doesn't work for me. Simple statement, 5 words. That doesn't work for me, but here's something that would work better. That doesn't work for me is kind of a clear statement that whatever the behavior is or the situation is not acceptable. And we need to have a relationship where my needs are respected here. It has to be acceptable to me, and it has to be acceptable to you too. But it's not fair for you to run over my needs or my rights in this relationship. And so one way to say that is, that doesn't work for me. What if we did this instead, for example? These particular ones are ones that have been studied quite extensively by psychologists. And these tend to yield the best results when working with folks. There are studies where you say the what part without the why part. For example, there's one famous one. I don't know if you mentioned this last year. Somebody did. Anyway, there's many of them. But one was they did a study at a bus stop in the rain. And they set up a bunch of people in the bus stop underneath the little roof. And they were all part of the experiment. And then a new person would walk up. And no, they were not part of the experiment. No, that's right. They went to crowded bus stops, and there was no room for anyone else to fit under the roof unless those people scrunched together a little bit more. And so the person would come up, and they'd stand there, and no one would move. And they'd say, could you please move? And no one would move. And then they would say, can you please move because I'm getting wet? Everybody moved. Right, it's like a 75% difference, adding the why part. Something about American culture and the way we ask things. This is not true in other cultures, but it is true in the United States. The what and why. And so explaining the flip-flops, or explaining other attire issues, or timing, or any of the things that might come in the way of your doing what it is you're trying to do with this individual is an opportunity to use the what and why. Or you could flip it around. Because being on time is really important in this particular firm, could you please make sure you show up on time next time, for example. It's that why part that's really important. You see, the why part may be obvious to us, and this brings us back to subjective experience. It may be obvious to us that we need to be on time for the meeting, but to that individual, maybe it's not. Maybe it is, and they're flaunting the rules, and that's not so good. But as these are young kids, and maybe they've never been in an office before, they may simply not know how important it is to be on time. And I've talked with some folks who are in prison, and they were going through a training program for interviews and how to get jobs. And these are folks who've never been in any kind of a space like that. And they literally had to tell them everything, like take a shower before you do your interview so that you don't smell bad. That was news for these guys. That was very important for them to hear. And so we might expect, if we've been in the business world for a long time, that it's obvious that you get clean and you look your best for an interview. But to these guys, it wasn't. And so that why part is really important. It can really betray our own prejudices, our own experience, and it can take us out of understanding where the other person is. 3-part iMessage is another one that's been proven to be the most effective sentence construction in a challenging situation. No guarantee. There's a lot of times that it's not going to help you. But instead of saying, when you don't listen to me, no. When you let our kid have dessert without eating his dinner first, it's going to be very unhealthy, and our kid is going to learn how to break the rules. A very different way to say something like that is, I feel frustrated when you let our child eat dessert without eating the rest of his dinner first, because I feel that he gets a sense that it's okay to break the rules. That's a three-part I statement. And research shows that actually this creates the best possible impact on the other individual that you're speaking with. It's generally most applicable in a situation that's a little bit heated or could be a little bit heated. You know how you say something the wrong way and boom, the other person is going to be defensive and that's the end of the conversation. If you want to avoid that, you could say something like this. So let me ask you, again, take an example from your mentoring experience where a person did something that was not ideal. They broke the rules or they didn't follow whatever it was you were supposed to be doing. How could you construct a phrase that says, I feel X, disrespected, frustrated, surprised, whatever it is, when you, whatever the behavior is, and because. Be prepared to explain in different ways. Sometimes the person just doesn't hear it the way that you say it. Maybe these don't work and there's another way to say it. And finally, this is really important. Just because you have something to say and you have a need at that moment doesn't mean that you get to stop listening to whatever the person's response to it is. The person may have some reason why he or she is doing it that you never thought of before. Like I said before, the earbuds. Right? That boss could have gone to that person and said, I don't like it when you have earbuds, and if you keep those earbuds in, you're fired. Or they could have said something like, would you please keep the earbuds out when you're off of your ears when you're working, because we're a team here and we want everybody to be connected, or whatever. But the person might say, I'm not listening to music, I'm not goofing off. The reason I put the earbuds in my ears is because everyone walks by my desk all day and saying, hey George, how was the weekend? Hey George, how was the weekend? Hey George, how was the weekend? I can't get my work done. Wow, you learned something because you were listening. Anybody have a question about one of these? How many people frequently use this one? None. Some. Couple. Okay. How many frequently use this one? All right. How many frequently use this one? A couple of folks. All right. Yep. They what?
Teach you that in Free Cana.
Do they? Yeah.
Getting married.
Got it. You know, it's true that everything we've talked about tonight is not just about mentors and mentees. It's about every relationship you have, right? Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. Any questions about this? All right, last 5. Yes.
Are you going to be emailing this for the whole?
Are we? Yes. Yes. So last one, I want to take the last 5 minutes to hear what comes up for you in the context of our conversation here. What are you going to take out of this room into your relationship that'll help you and your mentee have a better relationship? What's something you want to focus on? What's a technique you want to use? What's a question you want to ask? What is it that you want to bring out of this conversation? Because having a nice conversation at night doesn't do anything unless you take something from it. So one more thing, these gaps are going to happen. And think carefully about how you want to respond when those things happen. Whether it's with compassion, whether it's with respect, whether it's with integrity, whatever. Because that's going to be something that's a powerful experience for that individual. It may not be such a big deal for you. You're just telling them how they ought to dress next time around. For that individual, it might be a much bigger deal than it is for you. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Thank you all for your patience. I hope you take something from tonight. Good luck to everyone.